will definitely be covering that. Today on the panel, on my left is Morva Roani, who is the Executive Director of Web3 Council. Next to her, we have Inaki Gomez, who is a Senior Associate Regulatory at BLG, who is also our Corporate Counsel. We have Charlene Cieslik, who is well known in the crypto community of Toronto, but currently Chief Compliance Officer of OTT Pay, which is a China-based web payment solution. And then we had Andrew Howarth. Sorry, he fell off the side of the slide, but he is nonetheless just as important. He is currently actively our counsel in our new form subsidiary in Cayman Islands. So thank you guys for coming today. Exciting time for the space. We're probably going to speak less about AI and more about tokenization, because that's what I know best. But it's an exciting time for Canada and also for Polymath. So to start off here, I'm going, Morva obviously has had, as executive director of her Web3 Council, has a really front page pulse to the government and what's happening here in Canada at a government level. So I'd love to hear more, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, the events of the last few weeks, the newly elected government, the newly elected cabinet, and, what are your feelings for what's coming in the next few weeks?
Sure.
Not next few weeks, sorry. We'll give them a few months.
Right. I would give them a few years. So obviously big election in Canada, and just to get that back, so I'm the lobbyist on the Hill, so I deal with regulators, but a lot with policymakers as well, specifically in Ottawa, but also the provincial level. Big election. I'm just happy to have stability in terms of knowing who's going to be in government. But what we can expect with this new government, I've been telling everyone in the industry that this is still a new government. It's new leadership, it's new cabinet, new advisors. And Mark Carney is a central banker. I think he is really going to prioritize a regulation first approach. He's going to be pragmatic. He's going to value and he's going to prioritize innovation, whereas the former administration took a very risk-averse approach to any form of innovation in the financial sector. As a country, we do have a very conservative regulatory culture, especially when it comes to financial services, compared to actually many of our trading partners. And so I do think we can expect a shift. I think that so cabinet was announced earlier this week. Some of those appointments are, I would say could signal to what this administration will focus on. The new Minister of Finance is Minister Champagne. He was previously owning the innovation file. There's a new Ministry of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation led by a new MP. And the new Minister of Government Procurement is Joel Lightbound. He's historically been very supportive of this industry. And so I feel positive. I feel confident and optimistic that if the industry really focuses on that regulation first pragmatic approach and how the industry can complement and drive efficiencies in our existing financial services, we can get a lot of success in the next few years. But we have to be really careful how we message things.
Okay. I am glad that you feel confident that this new government can sort of lead us that way. And I also appreciate that Morva also, having talked to her, I met her recently, but she likes to stay apolitical. I tend to be more political, so I have my own opinions. But Charlene, as somebody who's also been in this space, and she's in payments now, but she hasn't veered too far away, and she was one of the first women executives at Coinsquare. She was actually the first woman the only female executive at Coinsquare, and a role model for me coming up in this industry. And she was there when, a lot of things happened. And now Coinsquare, ironically, this week, with the big news about Coinsquare merged with WonderFi and then was acquired this week by Robinhood. Charlene, I'd just like to hear your thoughts about, you've been fighting the good fight in crypto and regulation for years. Are you happy with this new government, with their approach? Do you think we can catch up to the U.S.?
Well, I mean, I really liked what you had to say because when I first got into crypto, there was definitely no government approach going on. It languished for 6 or 7 years. They didn't even pay any attention to it. So, of course, lots of things crept up unregulated. Best time to launch a new product when nobody's looking. And it attracted a lot of people, some good, some not so good. And I worked with the anti-money laundering regulator to get the crypto regulations going. And that was the easy solution of let's throw it in as a money service business. And that was okay for a time. But then the securities regulators stepped in. And so this sort of piecemeal and a bit of battle in the sandbox of who owns regulating crypto. Well, I lived through that. There was no concerted effort. There was infighting. There was a lag time, which again allowed a lot of bad things to happen. They were late to the game. It left a stain on this industry. It definitely had its problems at CoinSquare. I'll stay away from that though. And so to see the after effects of the bad things happen, then some good things happen. And hopefully, I hope you're right. Because within there, I'm sure it'll happen. But that they take a wider look at financial services, access to financial services and innovation, because we are lagging behind. We did this piecemeal approach, then it just sat there for a little while. The CSE was putting out little bits of advice, but it would be better to, be able to step back and look at it from the bigger picture to help the people in this space know what to do instead of languishing around like we did trying to figure things out.
And just a follow-up question for Morva and Charlene before I move on to the boys. With the recent acquisition by Robinhood of WonderFi, having been part of one of their brands, CoinSquare, I mean, I sort of have my own thoughts about it, going through all the blood, sweat, and tears that Charlene and I went through with CoinSquare, and then becoming a regulated broker-dealer, ATS, being one of the first, actually the first in Canada to crack that open. How do you guys feel now that it's been acquired by this like behemoth American company? And what do you think that means for Canadian innovation? Yeah, go ahead.
From a government regulator perspective, I think it should be a signal to them that they should take competition in the marketplace more serious. I know the Ontario Securities Commission has a competition mandate. I don't know what that means or what they're doing about that. But I think more so now than ever, we need to take our sovereignty seriously as a country, and ensure that we're empowering local Canadian companies to be able to compete well in this market, because there's a lot of interest in Canada. There's going to be companies from all over the world are going to take an interest in this market, and we need to be able to ensure that Canadian companies are equipped with growing and scaling here without wanting an exit strategy. And I do think from a Possum standpoint, like that should be a priority in Ottawa.
Shirley?
Well, I would just say that it would have happened a lot sooner had not there been an enforcement action, because we had quite a lead in the market, right? We were 3 years ahead of everybody, and that I don't want to say too much about this. I've said enough. You can see it on YouTube. I'm told I'm not allowed to say things like that anymore, but I'm happy that what's has happened for everybody involved, because it was kind of roller coaster. I know the highs were high and the lows were very low, especially as somebody in the compliance department. And they say you only learn when things are tough. And that's probably true. I maybe would have liked to have gone my whole life without having gone through a securities enforcement action and whistleblower retaliation. But at the end of the day, we're seeing that despite that happening, it culled the herd, and it got rid of certain elements, let's say. But the company, flourished and was acquired and now hired again. And now there's a success story there. And we were part of it. We were part of it in the early days and the tough days. And I'm just glad to see that the Canadian market is getting raw, because how, what a good way to get into Canada, do an acquisition. They already have all their licenses. They don't have to do that heavy lifting. Usually it's Canadian companies doing that in the US so that they can launch or other countries. So to see it come this way,
Yeah.
that was new for me in this space and different. So I'll say congratulations for that.
So this is actually, I appreciate those responses. Thank you. This is a great segue because even though I was part of, and Charlene were part of the CoinSquare story, and running a digital asset exchange, I now find myself in a new company with a new thesis, tokenization, and that bridges me to the second part of this panel, where I'm going to focus some of the questions on Inaki, who's our active member of our legal team in the Canadian filing to go public, and also Andrew, who is our counsel on the Cayman side that we just set up with the recent announcement of our purchase asset agreement of bringing our Polymesh Association down to Cayman and bringing the band back together, so to speak. We're going to be going public. First company to go public, usually correct me if I'm misspeaking. She's actually our counsel for BLG in the audience. But we are going to be the first layer one to go public, to become a public entity. So super exciting. We hope it creates a lot of, forward momentum in the industry. Anybody who is in the public markets who trades can now own a piece of a layer one blockchain. So I'd love to now focus your attention on these two guys who are actively working on our file. And just to speak, Inaki, I mean, you've seen it all in the last few months. We're still working on our filing, but speak to us about some of these challenges and the path for tokenization here in Canada based on what you can share about what we're going through.
Yeah, thank you, and hello, everyone. I'll probably start by linking it back to what Riva said earlier. Canada has quite a conservative approach from a regulatory perspective. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but it's obviously something that can stagnate or at least limit how development and certainly research and development from a issuer perspective can evolve. I think what we need to focus on is how do we work within the guardrails that exist in Canada, and then to the extent that we can move forward is working with the regulators to educate them as to how these technologies can operate within the rules or are not caught within the rules. But I think that's the approach that we've worked with you guys, is trying to understand the underlying technology, trying to distinguish between what the technology is versus what Polymath does as a technology service provider, and then continue to sort of push the business forward to make sure that the future investors of your public company understand the value proposition that you have.
And do you feel working with the TSX? I mean, I know we're going public on the venture exchange, but you've obviously had a lot of experience on probably dealing with all the exchanges in Canada. Do you feel they really understand the backbone of our technology, but more importantly, blockchain Web3?
I mean, I can't speak to TSX, but I have experience working with other exchanges. Julie and I actually helped WonderFi go public. And at the time, it was interesting because there was an appetite to understand the technology. I think people, whether it's regulators or exchanges, do want to understand so that, when these issuers or technologies are made public, available to the public, they're, safe in many ways, so that we do prevent situations where bad actors take advantage of public. Now, it is an educational piece, but I think my experience has always been that with the right attitude, with the right approach, the regulators and the exchanges are willing to understand and learn these things.
And then I'm going to sort of bring in Andrew onto this piece. So like I mentioned, we're integrating our layer one Polymesh, and the previously Polymesh Association lived in Switzerland. We have created a subsidiary business, Polymesh Labs in Cayman. So Andrew, just talk to me, why Cayman, why a lot of these Web3 companies are going to Cayman, what's specific about the ecosystem there from a legal regulatory perspective, and just, I guess, Inaki too, to sort of speak to how we can continue to operate with a little bit of separation and still be a Canadian top co.
Thank you so much. I think it's nice. I think this interplay is nice. And then you used the word conservative on the Canadian side. And obviously, I think, but I'm not going to tell you a lie to say that no one is going to look at the Cayman Islands and think, well, there's a conservative jurisdiction for you. But it's nice because it shows the interplay. And you can kind of read into it why it works like that, looking at the two jurisdictions. And a lot of it comes out, we were talking about, so a lot of this comes down to, as far as I can tell, consumer protection, because Canada has a population, it has consumers it wishes to protect. Wherever you have large established jurisdictions, they're going to need a level of regulation. They're going to need to protect their human beings that live there, their consumers. When you've got locations where it's the Cayman Islands or it's Bermuda or it's BVI, speaking to Cayman, but of those jurisdictions that operate that very similar model, none of them are ever going to be looking into the depths of consumer protection because they simply don't have the depths that consumers. To use the horrible terms onshore and offshore is always going to look back at onshore to put in place those types of protections, which is why you're always going to end up with that level of protection seated there. And that means there's always going to be this interplay because you're always going to have space for entities that could be useful and helpful in a space where you don't have to worry about consumer protection because there are elements of your business you don't need to be consumer basic and don't need to have to think about those things. And then there will always be elements of the business where actually you want to think about consumer protection because practically you want a level playing field. You don't want your competitors to be disregarding consumer protection because you yourselves are not.
I would just add, I mean, I think it's also important. It doesn't mean that in a conservative environment you just sort of take it and continue as business as usual. I think there is a opportunity, whether it's lobby groups or industry, to talk to the regulators and work with them to advance things. Obviously, in Canada, crypto trading platforms, the level to get a CoinSquare, a BitBuy, a Netcoins index to where they are today to the long time, many, many years. And now it's like, okay, what is the next stage or next step, whether it's tokenization or derivative instruments? All that takes time. And maybe it's just grappling with what the underlying issues are from a consumer protection perspective.
Well, completely. And no one wants unregulators. That's as far as I can tell. That's the worst case scenario. And it's one of those things that Cayman has in its favor. It's not no regulation at all. It's some. Because none is terrible. None is useless because you can't get a legal opinion. You go, hey, what is this legal? Oh, we don't know. There's nothing. You've got nothing to base on. And so you want something. You want a baseline. And that will come, that needs to come in all jurisdictions. It's just the speed of the industry and the development of regulation, the legislative process. I would say desire. But it can't keep up and that makes it hard because people want a level playing field to play on, but they can't necessarily get there. And it means that where you've got jurisdictions like Cayman, they can get a little bit quicker because they only need to get so far up the curb to be useful.
Can I just add to that? One to say, and I agree with you that I don't think our conservative culture when it comes to financial is a bad thing. I think in the long term it can actually give us a competitive edge. And the industry, at least, I mean, I've been in this industry for 3 years now. I've never heard no regulation for the reasons that you laid out. But it is a matter of, are we talking about consumer protection or are we talking about investor protection? It is a matter of, is it this regulator or is it this regulator or the other one? Or is it even within anyone's scope currently, or do we need a bespoke legislation? And I think those conversations have been stifled for the past few years. And so when I say I express optimism earlier, it is still cautious optimism because we do need to have those difficult conversations interjurisdictionally. Frankly, with the government needs to have it with the industry, but also the heads of agencies need to have it with each other. And that is what will move the needle long term. I don't think anybody credible in this space, especially in Canada, is wanting a wild west or a less conservative culture. Maybe I'll jump in on that because I think we lived through the opposite of what you just said. Because fair enough, I'll try to put this politely, but in the Earth Center, really good example on the Wild West, and it was a race to the bottom, and it was let's find the jurisdiction of least regulation, as there is usually no regulation, but there's something. But where there was no regulation, they found it and they set up there. And I, living through that as a compliance person, I was like, you don't really need me here if your goal is to not comply. So why am I here?
And I think that's so important because regulators obviously have to have
remember, like elephant memory, and that having gone through that really sets the tone for conversations today.
No, and it's understand what he's going to say too is that all that playing around and race to the bottom made it so that it's like what is the expression, like we walk so you could run, or was the other way around? Like
Yeah.
there was the airbed.
And you were part of that, Charlie. You were the trailblazer. So stop it. Okay, sorry, I've been given a notice of time here. I could probably talk to these guys. I actually had them upstairs at lunch talking, and I was like, guys, save some of this for the actual panel. But I have one question, last question. It's going to be a rapid fire question, 30 seconds max each. We'll start with Andrew. If you had the year of a global regulator, what's the one thing you'd ask them to prioritize in the next 12 months to unlock innovation in this space? And when I say this space, I am going to talk about blockchain and tokenization.
Certainty. Letting people know what it is they need to comply with.
So, for
I'm going to go with mandating in legislation the right to a bank account for a corporation, because Canada has suffered greatly over this. Like, I'm known for getting banks for people who agree with you. They should have gotten a bank, but some of them should have gotten a bank. But there are jurisdictions that they protect the right to have a bank. But that's our biggest hurdle in Canada for any crypto-based, any kind of technologies. Like, they don't understand it. You don't get a bank account, then you can't operate here. Literally, it's been 10 years I could do the same thing because of that. So I'll close there. It's for everybody. Unless you launder money, then he close you down.
all right, Inaki.
As the other regulatory lawyer, Andrew already took my piece, but I'll add that I think innovation or willingness to be innovative, right? I think working with industry in a way that still worries or concerns with investor protection, but understanding that, we want to be competitive in the global scheme, and so we want to have investors come, we want to have companies come, and with the certainty from a regulatory perspective helps, but we need to continue to adjust as the industry requires.
Good answer. And last but definitely not least,
I'm going to make up a word.
go ahead.
Regulatory interoperability.
I like that.
Just for more, I would say for more things to work the same way across jurisdictions. And for, more institutional consolidation. Because I truly think if we want to have, build the future digital economy, that is the key that unlocks them.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much for joining this panel. Guys, if you see any of these four panelists, please go up and tell them what a great job they're doing to crack open the space and get things moving in innovation. Thanks, guys.